Okay, so we're 5 minutes past. Got only a handful of people today. We're just going to get started. I expect a couple more people will trickle in as we get going here, but just so we don't take up everyone's morning, we'll get going. Again, introductions. My name is John Gestel, Client Relations Coordinator here. I'm sure I've spoken to many, if not all of you at some point or other. This is Dayton O'Connor. He's our lead analyst here. And then this is Rob Bernhard. He's our corporate counsel. So you guys, if you guys have any analysis questions or legal questions, we've got you covered. This is our monthly office hours where we just address general questions. The way we typically handle this is first we'll go through the submitted questions, and then we'll open up the floor for any specific questions. As I'm sure you heard me say earlier, please use the Q&A option rather than the chat option. It's a little bit easier for us to take a look at. So we'll dive right in here. Just run through the list. First one that we have here is how often are dividend payments? Is this shared or do you have full ownership? What are the fees involved after investing? So a three-part question here. The first part, how often are dividend payments or distributions? Really depends on the asset that you purchase. So we ascribe by the distribution schedule of the entity that's providing the royalty payments. So for example, ASCAP, they have their own distribution schedule. BMI has their own distribution schedule. Warner Chappell, Sony Music, they all have different schedules. Now they all have different frequencies as well. So for example, ASCAP and BMI pay on a quarterly basis. Many publishers pay biannually. Some companies even pay monthly. So the payment frequency you should expect depends on the schedule of that particular company. Is this shared or do you have full ownership? So inherently, the assets are only a portion of the overall royalty rights for the underlying IP. So expect it to be generally a share. However, any asset on the site does have to be purchased in its entirety. You can't just pay for a portion of it and get a share of the royalties that come through. So it is inherently a share. Now, for full ownership, I do want to clarify that this is not copyrights. What you are specifically buying is just the right to the revenue. No, licensing control or anything like that. And then what are the fees involved after investing? There are none. So we do admin the assets for investors, but this is a free service we provide. So there's no ongoing fee for that. Really the only fee that you pay as an investor is on a transaction basis, unless of course you have our all access membership, which has an annual fee attached to it. So that covers that one. Moving on. What is life of rights? So the life of rights is the length of the copyright as per copyright law. Now it's determined in the United States as the life of the last surviving artist that contributed to the works plus 70 years. And then after that 70-year period, then that intellectual property becomes part of the public domain. So it's no longer eligible for any kind of a royalty collection. Next one here. Is there a risk to the royalties purchased? Is there a risk the royalties purchased will become worthless? Is there any chance of litigation filed against me as the new owner? Rob, you want to take that one about litigation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, really, you're taking a passive interest in the income. Whoever the seller is just going to assign their interest in the income to you. Of course, I always say anyone can sue anyone from anything, but as long as you as the investor are not going out and trying to license a song when you don't have the rights to, if you're just collecting the passive interest as intended, I'd say it's infinitesimal that you would be involved in any sort of litigation on your end, unless you were doing something that you weren't contractually allowed to do.
Right. Great. Next one here. Are there any perks for veterans? No. I mean, the perks are you can buy these assets, but no formal perks for veterans. Any size of musician can use your platform? Yes, we can work with musicians of all shapes and sizes. If you've had a chance to look through the available assets, I mean, you'll see catalogs that are coming from like Jay-Z and Beyonce or Drake, all the way down to, some small Christian group from Canada. So yeah, we can really work with anybody. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. All right, next one here. Here to learn any basics on investing in royalties in general. So normally for getting started with the basics of the platform, how things work, we do recommend going through the blog page on Royalty Exchange. There's a section there that's dedicated to investor guides. So you'll have walkthroughs on how the auctions work, how the exchange works, all the various ways to buy, the closing process, a lot of stuff there. If you have any specific questions on the basics of investing, please send them in here. We're happy to chat about them with you. Or you can always email into us, set up a private call with myself or Dayton or Rob or somebody. So we're happy to get you taken care of. Now, next one here, how are royalties audited and dispersed to the appropriate investor? Rob, you want to talk about audits?
Yeah, and I think maybe this is more going towards who is ensuring that the royalties get to the right place. So kind of at a basic level, every deal we do will have a royalty distributor which is how we refer to them. So in those cases, so whether it's a performance rights organization for performance royalties, whether it's a publisher for publishing royalties, these entities are in charge of finding who is using the music, auditing those entities, determining how much is owed based on the various agreements that cover those types of uses, and then making sure they get to the right place. So really, it's kind of the royalty distributor to do that, and then once it comes into the royalty exchange ecosystem, we collect the royalties from the royalty distributor and pay them to the investor.
Awesome. Okay, next one here. Are there any recommended publications to read for investors that are new to royalties? I mean, again, I'd point you to our blog page. Our blog's pretty comprehensive. Rob, Dayton, I don't know if you guys have any additional stuff.
Yeah, honestly, we're obviously biased, but we have some of the most comprehensive and certainly investor-facing pieces that are specific to the rights that are for sale on royalty exchange. I don't really know of any other place that kind of directs articles that are easy to understand, with different levels of we have a 101, we dive a little deeper if you're interested. So yeah, definitely check out our blogs. It's pretty well organized and has a ton of information there.
Mm-hmm. If you're looking for just language stuff, Song Trust has a pretty great glossary of terms. So that might be another one, but it's like reading the dictionary, kind of dry. I don't know, Dayton, I don't know if you have any recommendations, but.
No, I think that we have put together a lot of really great information on the website about investing in music royalties. I would also say if you're looking for information on kind of the general financialization of music, what's happening in the industry, read the trades, the business vertical and Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, because that'll also give you perspective on what's happening throughout the industry with respect to these kinds of transactions.
Great. Okay, next one here. For a first-time investor, ideally, what royalties should I look to invest in? So this is tricky because it really depends on you as an investor and what your pricing tolerances are, what your risk tolerances are. So it depends on you. I don't know, Dayton, you have anything to add to that one?
No, I think you've covered that.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say determine your budget and determine what your goals are. Because different assets have different yields, they have different timeframes to recoup. So there's a lot to look into. Just take a look at your own portfolio and see how you want royalties to fit into it. And that should take you where you want to go. Next one here, how do I calculate break even when forecasting for unpredictable diminishing revenue streams? Dayton, you want to talk about
that? Sure. And I think based on the kind of the preview that we have to the questions, this will cover the next piece that's up in the Q&A as well. For these kinds of assets, I think it's tough to do better than a discounted cash flows model. When you're taking a look at the listing, you'll have available the raw data that's tied to the asset. And from that, you can take a look at the historic earnings. We also put that information up on the listings as well. And you can generate a cash flow model, based on how much you're willing to spend and what you think is going to be happening with that particular asset. That'll determine, with your rate of return in mind that you're targeting for this, how much you're willing to pay for something on the site. That being said, unpredictable diminishing revenue streams, also bear in mind some of the rules of thumb that we have for valuing assets on our site. Look at dollar age. Higher dollar age is going to translate most of the time to a more consistent income stream, which is going to be reflected in the pricing for the asset. Something that's more predictable has a higher value versus younger assets, lower dollar age. Those income streams are less predictable, and you're more likely to be paying at a premium at the time you acquire that if you're looking for a younger catalog versus an older catalog.
Awesome. Yeah, and that, like you said, leads into the next one. Most investments look like they will just break even on the initial capital. What am I missing? For that, I mean, that's why we look at the length of the term, the multiple that you pay based on those last 12 months compared to the dollar age and those core cohorts. So, take the whole picture into consideration. Yeah, what we see right now on average site-wide for assets is around a 10% return. So a little bit past break even, but that's what we see on average. Next one here, how do I invest or get started with your royalty platform? Well, getting verified is the first step. You probably would have already submitted your verification form if you're here. So that's the first step, and then just find something to buy. There is a lot of competition on the platform. Assets are selling very, very fast. So good to be pretty diligent with it. We do send out pretty regular updates about new opportunities that come up, but still, the faster you are, the better your chances are. So to get started, yeah, just buy something. Next one here. What is the least amount one can invest in royalties, and how does one transact money in royalty exchange? So the low end purchase amount we typically say is between $5,000 and $10,000. Now, this is not a firm rule. This is just what we expect. Now, you will sometimes see assets that transact under 5,000, sometimes 3, 2K, but it's really, really rare. Realistically, you should expect in the low end to be spending anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 as a baseline. And then obviously, the more you're willing to spend, the more opportunities you'll find. Right now, I believe last check, our median asset value was like around 60,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dayton, if you recall. I think it was somewhere around there. But we see plenty in the 20K range, plenty in the 30K range. So, we see a huge pricing spectrum. Now for actually buying on the platform, if you were to successfully purchase something, wire transfer is our standard method of payment. So you get an invoice with wiring instructions same day as your purchase, and then you would have 2 business days to wire that amount to us to get the process started. But wire transfer is how we pay for these. Next one here, private syndicate membership availability, and how do I get the opportunity to join? Rob, you want to talk about private syndicates?
Yeah, so what private syndicates we've done 3 of them. We actually haven't done any in a couple years. But the way those worked is that we created a special purpose vehicle, an LLC, to purchase a single asset, and they were all, in those cases, they were between $2 and $4 million. And then we were allowed to sell membership interest in the LLC to accredited investors. So since it's a membership unit in LLC, it's considered a security. So we had to do a filing, an unregistered filing for securities. And really, we don't anticipate any of those coming anytime soon, but that's kind of what they were and how they worked.
Cool. Next one here. Once the payment for the catalog is made, do I own the actual copyright to the songs in the catalog? And we kind of touched on this one earlier, but Rob, you want to elaborate here?
Yeah, unless the listing says it, I mean, it's very rare. Every once in a while, we will have a deal that does include copyrights, which means you would have to take an active interest in licensing the catalog or the song or whatever the copyrighted material is. But in almost all cases, it'll just be a passive income stream, so you will not own the copyright or have any licensing authority or anything like that.
Yeah, if you're curious to see what some of those prior copyright sales look like, if you go to the auction house specifically, there's a search bar. You search copyrights, a bunch of assets will come up. So that's normally how they're structured, if you want a little bit of context. Okay, next one here. I'm new to the space and would like some more info on figuring out the potential ROI for the royalties. Now, we kind of touched on this earlier. Dayton, do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, as John mentioned, for the portfolio that we've taken a look at in the past, ROI is typically around 10% on average. Potential ROI, it's hard to set like an upper band, because think about ways that different catalogs can be utilized over time. Opportunities for synchronizations, for the development and growth and popularity for streaming services that are coming out. So it's entirely possible that one can acquire an interest in a catalog and see those income streams grow over time for a variety of reasons. So establishing a cap would be pretty difficult. I think that with any of these assets, you would do very well by yourself to take a look at the data, put together a model on your end to determine what targets you're trying to achieve for your own returns based on your own investment practices, and use that as the basis when evaluating assets on our platform.
Right. And so a little bit of context on that, for that upside, there was a catalog that we had transacted on the site that we did hit viral on TikTok, and the earnings went from like $2,000 a month to like $50,000 a month. Now that's like hitting the lottery, right? Super rare, crazy upside. But I mean, you could just see the potential for an asset's upside is, I don't want to say limitless, but I don't have another word that is appropriate there. So now that kind of leads us into the next question here. How do royalties on TikTok work? So this is a good question, because TikTok's new and a lot of these contracts and licenses are still being negotiated. Rob, Dayton, do either of you guys have info you want to speak to here?
Yeah, so I guess speaking to your comment about how the one deal saw a giant spike because of a song went viral on TikTok. On the sound recording side, they pay a little bit differently. It's kind of market share based on the number of users who make a video using your recording. So rather than on Spotify, where you can go look and say, hey, this has been streamed, 1 million times. TikTok doesn't look at least right now, as far as what I understand, they don't look at how many viewers are viewing the videos. They're looking at how many videos are actually created. So like if a dance craze goes off and millions of people are making their own video, that's really where you're going to see a big spike, at least for now. I mean, I think we do expect to see a public performance royalty for the songwriter side, but in that case, it was the actual artist and sound recording owner on that side. So yeah, it's still new, but they calculate it and look at it a little bit differently, at least now.
Awesome. Yeah, TikTok's a little bit of an anomaly right now because everything's kind of still being negotiated. So good question. Next one here. What is the settlement timeframe and process for the purchase? What are the privacy policies associated with the purchase? Rob, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So when you buy something on Royalty Exchange, you'll shortly thereafter receive the purchase agreement and an invoice. You'll have 2 days to pay for the asset in full and sign the purchase agreement. Once that's signed, we'll handle the transfer of the royalty income. We'll have that paid from the distributor to Royalty Exchange. And at that point, kind of depending on what the distributor's time frame is, we'll verify that it gets the assignment gets put in place, and you'll start receiving royalties. You'll be entitled to whatever that next payment that comes out after your purchase date. So if it's the next day, you'll receive that payment. Likely it'll be from Royalty Exchange. What we do is we hold 10% of the purchase price from the seller's proceeds, because oftentimes a sale will take place in too soon of a time frame for the distributor to actually make that change. So the seller will probably get that first payment. What we do is just withhold part of their sale proceeds and then do a debit credit so that the investor gets what they're entitled to based on the purchase agreement. So settlement can take a couple days, it could take a couple weeks, but regardless of that time frame, we've got you covered based on that withholding.
Cool. And then privacy policy.
I guess I'm not sure if you're talking about your privacy as an investor. That's all covered. We have a privacy policy on royaltyexchange.com. You can check that out at the bottom of any page there. That'll kind of cover all of the terms there. So I think that's probably the best source to get that answer.
Perfect. Next one here, to get the royalties, is it by different streams? Yes, streaming's oftentimes part of the royalty revenue, not exclusively. But yeah, oftentimes that's a big portion of it. On any listing, we'll have a breakdown of the earnings by source. So you can see what portion of the overall earnings is coming from streaming. So you should have a lot of that information available. And then of course, on every listing, we have the raw data file associated with that catalog there. You can always do your own analysis with the actual numbers that come directly from the payor. So, ton of info to work with there. Next one here, if Royalty Exchange were to go out of business, how would I be able to continue receiving money from my investments? So Rob, you want to talk about our accounting agreements?
Yeah, absolutely. So our accounting terms are also on the website. You can check those out within the terms of use. But what those do is they require Royalty Exchange. If we're unable to act as the administrator of payments, it's our obligation to find a third party or to redirect the income, if possible, straight from the distributor. So if Royalty Exchange goes out of the business, there'll be a third party that handles those payments to you. You as the investor are entitled to the payments regardless of which distributor or administrator actually pays them.
Awesome. And just adding to that, on our purchase agreements, that's a direct contract between you and the seller. So we're actually not even a party to that. So your ownership is totally separate from the status of Royalty Exchange. It's a direct contract.
That's right.
Next one here, how do I get dividends / get money back after investing? We kind of already talked about this with our administration. So we'd set you up in our admin portal, which is called the Payment Hub, and you get all your payments there. So you'd set your banking information there. That's where you'll get your statements, your tax docs, all that stuff happens with the Payment Hub portal. So we get you set up there after you actually purchase something, but it's all managed through that portal. Next one here, how do investors ensure all royalties are paid and distributed? Can investors request audits? Rob?
Yeah, so as an investor, so the accounting agreement we just mentioned, you would have an audit right of Royalty Exchange, but you would probably not have an audit right of the underlying distributor. Those are typically exclusive to whoever's in contract. They're in contract with, so the seller or another party like that. They would have the audit right, and the distributor that most often wouldn't grant that to the investor itself. But Royalty Exchange, as the intermediary, has relationships with each of these distributors that can help resolve issues. If we think there's a problem with the payments, we kind of have an insight into all that and contacts at the distributors to try to look into it and make things right. It's not a formal audit, but it is a little bit of protection and insight that I think is certainly helpful.
Awesome. Okay, next one here. Will NFTs hold their value? Well, this is kind of the $1 million question that everyone in the world is asking right now. So we hope so. For NFTs on a Royalty Exchange, they are still grounded in the royalty revenue. It's not just an intangible asset that exists in the ether. It actually is generating income for you. So for us, it'll hold its value just like any other asset on Royalty Exchange would, because it's based in those royalty payments. But I mean, if you know the answer to that, let us know. Rob, Dayton, any of you guys have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Next one here, can I purchase royalties in euros? We accept payment in US dollars. Our accounts can only hold US dollars, so no, you'd have to send it to us in US dollars. Your bank should be able to do that if you're initiating a wire, so just talk to them. Really shouldn't be a problem. We have investors from all over the world and haven't run into any issues like that yet. So yeah, it should be pretty doable. Next one here. What is the process once a bid is won? It seems that there are additional clauses from other interested parties. So we kind of covered the closing process already. Sometimes you'll see additional clauses like a matching right from a publisher or something like that. Those are not super common. You will see them come up from time to time. But all the contracts and everything are pretty straightforward, designed to be easy. I don't know, Dayton or Rob, any of you guys have anything to add to that?
No, yeah, I think we covered it.
Cool. Yeah. If you have something specific in mind for that, whoever asked that question, reach out to us. We can always look at specific unique cases and talk about any kind of additional clauses you might see there, but most assets don't have anything like that. So next one here, how is profit made off of royalties? How do you know which royalties to buy? So profit, I mean, that would be any royalties you gain after your initial investment. So how to profit off that is really determined by the price you pay for the asset, the length of the term, and the returns you should expect. Now, knowing which royalties to buy, that's like knowing which company is going to take off, which equities to buy. So can't really answer that for you. Can't make any claims or guarantees the future performance of royalty assets, unfortunately. But we can provide you as much information as possible to make an educated decision on what assets are likely to pay out consistently, perform well, things like that. Dave and Rob, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I just add for opportunities on the secondary market because as an investor, you're going to be able to acquire these royalty assets, and then you'll have the opportunity in most cases to potentially resell them to other investors. So in those cases, your profit could come from the royalty distributions that you collect, and then the price of the asset at the time of a resale against what you'd initially paid for it.
Awesome. Yeah, good point. Okay, so that covers it for our submitted questions. So I do see there's a handful of Q&A submissions here, so we'll get to these. First one here, is there any investor protection that you wouldn't in the future introduce an assets under management fee? Rob, thoughts on that?
Yeah, our accounting agreement on the website applies to any asset that you purchase under that accounting agreement. So within that, it waives an accounting fee. So we really wouldn't, under that agreement, have any right to introduce an asset under management fee for any asset that you purchase prior to any sort of change. Like we don't have any plans to change it. If we did change it, it would only be effective for any assets after that change would be put in place. That's probably the best I can answer that now, but there isn't one now. We wouldn't charge one on something that would fall under the current accounting agreement.
Cool. Next one here. What would happen if Royalty Exchange were to go out of business? How would I be able to continue earning revenue from my investments? We already talked about that, so you should be good on that. If there's something that you still wanted to speak to that one, just send in another question and we'll get to it. I see several for sale with a 10-year time frame. Is it safe to assume after the 10th year, the royalties expire and your original investment has no value? So yes. So the way the term deals work is at the end of the term, the rights automatically revert back to the original seller of that asset. Now, I wouldn't say that the investment has no value because you still recoup, you still collect payments for the length of the term. But take the term length into account when determining your offer price, things like that. We have seen some 10-year terms get as high as like an 8x multiple if it's really consistent. That's really, really unusual, but it has happened before. From a multiple standpoint, oftentimes we see things in like anywhere from 3 times to 6 times the last 12 months of earnings. So it still leaves you a solid several years of upside, assuming that the cash flow remains consistent. So there still is lots of potential upside. I mean, some of our highest yielding catalogs have been 10-year term deals. But in short, after that 10th year, yeah, the asset is no more. So the rights revert back to the seller. Dayton, Rob, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
No, it's good.
Okay, great. Next one here, can I resell your investments on your platform? Is there a resale market? Yes, you can resell any asset on Royalty Exchange that you bought on Royalty Exchange. Now, the resale medium could vary. Most often we'll have things cycling through the exchange. So you'll find both new assets and resale assets there. It's a pretty wide market. Right now, we've got like close to 600 assets listed there. But say you were to buy like residuals from a film, something like that normally cycles through our auction house. So depending on the asset could determine whether you sell it at auction or whether we went through the exchange. So kind of varies there, but you can resell anything. Next one here, how do you filter through the auction house to only see open auctions? So open auctions will actually automatically be listed at the top. Now auctions are getting less and less common. So right now we don't have any live. We should have one going live in the next few weeks here. Normally there's a lot of communication around auctions going live because they are limited opportunities. So I'd say just make sure you're signed up for our marketplace updates. So we can let you know when that stuff goes live. But that stuff will automatically be filtered to the top. Next one here, can you invest from the UK or the European Union? Yes, absolutely you can. No problem with that whatsoever. Yeah, shouldn't be a problem. Next one here, does life of rights mean you collect royalties until the life of the artist plus 70 years? Yes, that is what that means. So it's a very, very, very long time from your purchase date to when that becomes no longer eligible for royalties.
And one caveat to that, John, is if a song is created, has more than one songwriter or more than one artist, the copyright extends to the last surviving author plus 70 years. So it's even longer than, and this is obviously for, not obviously, but this is for anything created after 1978.
Right. Yeah, so it's a really long time. I mean, for that very reason, lots of investors will buy these through a trust just to, help manage the asset given how long of a lifespan there is to it. Next one here, on average, if I had bought every asset on your platform, what would have been the rate of return? But yeah, that's around 10%. Like we said, our average return for every asset is around 10%. I think it was like 10.8% or something like that. Dayton, you might remember better than me, but yeah, around 10%. Next one here, how much time does it take for my offer to be accepted once I've submitted it on your site? I see the history on several listings and there are many offers that expire. I'm assuming it's due to the seller not willing to accept the offer due to price. There could be a lot of reasons why someone doesn't accept an offer. Offers are only good on the exchange for 24 hours. So that's why you'd see it expired. So we will actually automatically relist any eligible asset on the exchange on behalf of asset owners. So if you happen to be offering on something that someone's not actively looking to sell, it could be they're ignoring the offers. That's certainly possible, or it could be just not high enough for what that seller wants. It could be a lot of different reasons why someone doesn't accept. But it does have a 24-hour clock, so that's why you see a lot of expirations. And that is the last one here. Any last questions from any of you attendees here? Happy to chat with them. We got a couple more minutes here. Give you guys a few minutes to formulate anything, but if not, then we're going to conclude this Q&A session and move on here. So just give you guys a minute to think it over. And if not, then yeah, we'll be all set. So. Oh, here's one. Are there any plans to unitize the rights into smaller shares? So that's a great question. At the moment, I'd say no, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. The problem is when we split up these rights, we get a little bit close to securities. And when we're selling securities, that invites regulation from the SEC, FINRA, and all these larger financial institutions, which would cause a lot of problems for us. So at the moment, no, there's no plans. Rob, anything you want to add to that?
Well, that's what we got into with the private placement. So we did those a few times, and really we don't have plans to do those in the near future. I'm not saying we won't do it, but no plans at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, at the moment, no. Another one here, the 10% return you mentioned, is that annually or based on the original investment? I believe that's annualized, right, Dayton?
Yeah, it's annualized.
Cool. Next one here, can you define or describe the significance of dollar age in regards to analyzing a royalty? Yeah, so in short, the dollar age is a metric we use to help to determine the consistency of earnings over time. So the higher the dollar age, the more consistently a catalog has been historically earning. But there's a lot more to it than that. So we actually have a whole article breaking down the dollar age that goes into the formula for it, how it's weighted, what goes into it, what it means. So I'd recommend reading that. I can link that in the chat here. Dayton, you look like you had something you wanted to add to that too. So while I pull this up, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would think about when you're considering dollar age and evaluating how that is affecting an asset, consider visually the distribution of royalties over time. With something that has a higher dollar age, that's further along in the life cycle of that royalty income. So for valuable assets with a high dollar age, it's going to be at a further point along a long tail of distributions, right? Whereas with a younger assets and with a lower dollar age, this is why there's more risk that's baked into that. Because if you're looking at something that's in year 1, 2, 3 of its distributions, you don't know if at that point in the distribution cycle, if the asset going forward is going to have that long tail of future income, or if you're looking at something that has a fatter tail of distributions and that money is going to potentially fall off at a higher rate relative to other assets. And that's something that you can evaluate when you're taking a look at different income streams. If you're taking a look at different genres, you may expect to see the performance of those royalties vary over time. But that is at a high level what we consider when we're talking about dollar age. Are you further along the life cycle? Has there been a more established royalty income stream at the time of the acquisition for the asset? At a higher dollar age, yes, more distributions. There's more proof about what this asset is generated in the past and what it may generate in the future. Whereas you just don't have that kind of track record for a younger asset.
Awesome. Yeah, so take a look at that article. It should provide a lot of context there. Next one here, if you purchase life of rights, can you put it in a trust later? Yes, great question. So we can actually reassign these rights post-sale to an entity, to an LLC, to a trust, whatever you want to do. It's pretty easy for us. All we really have to do is, create a short form letter of direction. Rob will help you with that. So just reach out to us if that's something that you want to do, and we can get that set up for you. It's pretty easy. Okay, so that looks like the last one here. Any last questions while we have you all here? Going once. Going twice. Okay, so we're gonna conclude this here. Thank you all for attending. If you do have additional questions, or if you wanted a little bit more context on one of our answers here, don't hesitate to reach out to us. There will be a recording of this webinar posted to the site. We record all of these and post all of them for future review if you ever want to take a look back at an answer or something like that. So those will all be on the blog page, so don't hesitate to take a look at those. Again, my name is John Gestel with Dayton O'Connor and Rob Bernhard. And yeah, thank you all for coming. We'll see you guys, and have a good rest of your weeks. All right.
Thanks, guys.
All righty. Bye.